scary stories.
Every night, I share a story that most people wouldn't dare to tell. If you're listening, you're already one of us. And if you haven't subscribed yet, that's okay. But just know, every new subscriber brings me one step closer to building a safe place for the one person I love most, my mother. So if you enjoy these haunted tales, press that button, and maybe, just maybe, you'll be the reason the next story finds a happier ending. The sun hung low in the Texas sky, casting long shadows across the barren landscape. The hum of the car's engine was the only sound for miles. Hannah Oliver's hands gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles pale from the stress of the long drive. It had been a hard few months, her divorce final, her life unraveling, and she hoped a new start in a new town would offer the peace she desperately needed. Beside her, her daughter Mia stared out the window. The 10-year-old girl had her headphones in, but Hannah could tell she was listening to something dark, something unspoken. Mia had always been quiet since the divorce, but today, she was unnervingly still. "How much longer, Mom?" Mia asked, her voice distant, like she wasn't fully present. "Not long now. We'll be in Red Hollow in a few hours. Then we'll be settled. Okay?" Mia nodded, but didn't say anything more. Hannah glanced at her, but the girl was already lost in her own world. Hannah sighed, shifting in her seat as the road stretched endlessly ahead. And then, without warning, a loud pop from the tire shattered the quiet. "Great," Hannah muttered under her breath. She pulled the car over to the side of the road, cursing the circumstances. "Mia, stay in the car, okay? I'll fix this." The heat outside was unbearable, but the silence in the car was even worse. Hannah got out, grabbing the spare tire from the trunk. As she knelt to change the flat, she heard something, a faint rustling in the brush nearby. "Mia, stay put," Hannah called over her shoulder, but when she turned back, Mia was gone. "Mia?" Panic flooded her chest, and she stood up, looking around. She spotted her daughter near the edge of the dirt road, a small figure standing too close to the brush. Hannah's heart raced as she hurried towards her. "Mia, get back here!" Hannah shouted, but the words felt like they were swallowed by the desert wind. Suddenly, Hannah froze. Mia's small frame was bent over, her hands brushing the ground, as if she were searching for something. The hairs on Hannah's neck stood up as she realized what Mia had found. A rattlesnake, coiled up in the dirt, hissing in warning. "Mia!" Hannah screamed. But it was too late. Before Hannah could reach her, Mia cried out in pain. The snake struck, its venomous fangs sinking deep into Mia's ankle. Panic surged through Hannah's body as she rushed to Mia's side. The snake slithered away, leaving a venomous trail behind. Hannah's breath was shallow as she grabbed Mia, feeling the warmth of the girl's skin beginning to fade. "Come on, baby. Stay with me. Stay with me," Hannah whispered, frantically looking around for help. She spotted a dilapidated trailer in the distance, the only sign of life in the vast emptiness. With every step she took, Hannah's fear grew. Mia's body felt heavier, like it was slowly succumbing to the poison. Her daughter's breathing was slow, shallow, and Hannah could barely make out her words through the haze of panic. "Mom, it's cold," Mia whispered weakly. Her eyes fluttered closed, and Hannah's heart nearly stopped. When they reached the trailer, Hannah pounded on the door, desperation clawing at her throat. The door creaked open, revealing a woman standing in the doorway. Her eyes were dark, like they had seen too much, and she stared at Hannah with an eerie calmness. "What happened?" the woman asked, stepping aside to let them in. "Snake. It bit her. Please help her. I don't know what to do." The woman didn't hesitate. She moved quickly, pulling Hannah away from Mia's side. "You have to leave," she said, her voice cold but not unkind. "I can help, but you must go." "Please, I don't have time," Hannah pleaded, her voice trembling with fear. The woman's gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. It's your daughter's life, and it's yours to lose. Trust me. Hannah felt the cold chill of something beyond this world in the woman's voice. The woman didn't look like anyone who lived in the desert. There was an unnatural air about her. Still, Hannah had no choice but to trust her. The woman moved to Mia's side, muttering words under her breath. Hannah watched in stunned silence as the woman placed her hand over Mia's wound, and something strange happened. Slowly, impossibly, Mia's color returned. Her breath steadied. Minutes passed. Hannah barely dared to breathe, watching as her daughter, who had been moments away from death, seemed to come back to life before her eyes. When the woman finally stepped back, Mia lay still, breathing normally. Again. Hannah sank to her knees beside her daughter, tears of relief streaming down her face. You saved her," Hannah whispered. The woman stood in silence, her eyes lingering on the girl. Then she spoke. "The price must be paid. The debt is not finished." Hannah looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" "I don't understand." "You will," the woman said cryptically. "Before sunset, you must pay the price, or the poison will take her." Hannah's heart skipped a beat. "What? What are you talking about? You said she was fine." The woman turned her back, walking to the window without another word. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, and Hannah could feel the weight of an unseen clock ticking. "Who are you?" Hannah asked, her voice growing tight with panic. The woman turned slightly. "You will understand soon enough. But remember, you must act before the sun sets. Otherwise, she will die." Hannah's mind raced. She didn't know what this woman meant, but something about her words struck a chord deep within. She felt a chill crawl up her spine as she looked down at Mia, her daughter's small body still unscathed on the couch. But that wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. As Hannah tried to make sense of the woman's cryptic words, she felt a weight descend upon her, a suffocating sense of responsibility. The woman had saved Mia's life, but at what cost? Elias Blake, a man she had never seen before, appeared at the door just as the last of the sunlight bled from the sky. He was tall, dressed in a dark suit that seemed far too formal for the desert. He had an almost regal air about him, and his eyes gleamed with something dark and knowing. Hannah froze, staring at him in disbelief. "I'm here to collect," he said softly, his gaze never leaving her. "What are you talking about?" Hannah's voice shook as she moved to protect Maya. "The price," Elias said simply. "You must make a choice. Someone must die before the sun sets, or your daughter will be claimed by the venom." The night settled over the desert like a heavy, suffocating blanket. Hannah could barely breathe as she stood in the dim light of the trailer, her mind racing. The woman's cryptic words echoed in her ears, each one a cold reminder of the ticking clock she now faced. "Someone must die before the sun sets, or your daughter will be claimed by the venom," Elias Blake had said. Her heart pounded in her chest as she paced the floor, her thoughts spiraling. She couldn't understand how it could be real. How could the life of her precious daughter be so easily traded? And why was it her responsibility to end someone else's life? The idea of killing someone made her stomach churn. But as she glanced at Mia, lying unconscious but peaceful on the couch, the weight of the decision began to settle deeper into her soul. She had no choice. The venom would return, stronger and more deadly than before. Hannah's eyes flicked to the window, where the first hint of dawn was creeping across the sky. She didn't have much time left. She needed to act. The woman, Marla Whitaker, had left them with no more answers, only a sense of dread that gripped her tightly. The air around her seemed to hum with unease, as though the very world was holding its breath, waiting for her to make the next move. Suddenly, a sharp knock on the door startled Henna, her heart leaping into her throat. She had been so lost in her thoughts that she hadn't heard anyone approach. Henna cautiously approached the door, hesitating for a moment before she opened it. Outside stood Elias Blake, still dressed in his formal suit, his eyes as cold and distant as ever. "Time's running out," he said, his voice carrying a strange authority that sent a shiver down Henna's spine. "The sun will set soon. The price must be paid." Henna felt a chill settle over her as she stepped back, allowing him inside. She didn't know what else to say, her mind a fog of confusion and fear. "I can't do this," she whispered, almost to herself. "You don't have a choice," Elias replied, his eyes narrowing. "The curse has already claimed her life. You don't want to see what happens if you fail to act. Trust me, it's not just the venom you'll have to face. It's much worse." "Worse," Henna repeated, her breath catching in her throat. "What's worse than losing my daughter?" Elias didn't answer immediately. He merely stood there, his gaze fixed on Mia, who was still resting on the couch. He seemed to be contemplating something, his dark eyes calculating. "The curse doesn't stop with one life. It spreads, it feeds, and it will follow you wherever you go. You must break it, Henna. Kill one, save one. That's the only way out." Henna felt her knees go weak, and she slumped down into the nearest chair. This was beyond anything she could comprehend. How could this be real? Was this some sick joke, or was she truly stuck in a nightmare she couldn't escape? "What do I do?" she asked, her voice breaking. Elias remained silent for a moment, as if weighing his next words carefully. "Find someone deserving of death, someone whose life means nothing. That's how you break the cycle. But be careful. There's always a price to pay." The sun had barely risen, but Henna already felt the weight of the hours slipping away from her. She knew she needed to find a victim, but the idea of choosing someone to kill felt like a twisted version of reality. How could she pick a life to end? In the hours that followed, Henna tried to gather her thoughts, but they were muddled with the horror of what had already happened. Mia had been saved, but the curse still loomed over them, and Henna could feel its dark presence lingering like a shadow. The vision started shortly after Elias left. Henna saw things that weren't there. Dark figures in the corners of her vision, whispering in a language she couldn't understand. Sometimes she would turn around, only to find the room empty. But there was a presence, a coldness in the air that seemed to breathe along with her. As she walked through the small trailer, she noticed something strange. Her reflection in the cracked mirror seemed wrong. Her eyes were darker, almost hollow, and her face was twisted in an expression of grief and terror. Henna quickly turned away, but the image lingered in her mind, gnawing at her. The whispers grew louder, and Henna's skin crawled as she heard something, breathing softly in her ear. But when she spun around, no one was there. The trailer was empty, save for Mia. In a moment of desperation, Henna searched for answers, but everything she found only seemed to deepen the mystery. The town of Red Hollow was steeped in strange history of unexplained disappearances and rumors of a curse stretching back generations. The deeper Henna dug, the more she realized that this town, this place, had a dark secret. The curse was not just about saving Mia. It was part of something far more twisted, something older and more dangerous. By midday, the sun was high in the sky, and Henna knew that her time was running out. She could feel the weight of the curse pressing down on her, suffocating her. With every passing moment, she had to act. She had to find someone to kill. Her mind raced through every person she had seen in town, every face she had encountered. She thought about the strangers who passed by, the locals she had briefly spoken to. But who could she choose? Who was deserving of death? Her mind settled on one possibility. Troy Benson. The man she had seen arguing in the diner the previous day. He had been cruel to the waitress, his anger spilling out in violent words. He had a history of abuse and violence, and Henna couldn't help but wonder if he was the kind of person who deserved to die. Still, the thought of taking another life made her stomach twist. She had never been a violent person. How could she end someone's life? Even someone like Troy. But the curse wouldn't wait. The venom would return. Mia's life hung in the balance. As Henna drove through the dusty streets of Red Hollow, her heart pounded. She could feel the weight of her decision pressing down on her chest, the air thick with tension. When she reached Troy's house, she hesitated. The front door was ajar, and the sound of shouting echoed from inside. Henna stood frozen, staring at the house. It was her chance. But could she do it? The sun hung low in the sky, casting an eerie orange glow over the horizon. Henna's hands trembled on the steering wheel as she sat outside Troy Benson's house. Every inch of her body screamed for her to turn away, to abandon the path she had chosen. But she knew there was no turning back now. Her daughter, Mia, lay unconscious in the trailer, the venom threatening to consume her. If she didn't kill, if she didn't end someone's life, Mia would be taken. She couldn't let that happen. But as Henna stepped out of her car and walked toward the door of Troy's home, the weight of her decision bore down on her. She had never been a violent person, never even imagined herself in a situation like this, and yet here she was, about to commit murder. The front door creaked open, and Henna stood frozen, her heart pounding. From inside she could hear shouting, angry, violent voices. "I won't take the blame for your mess, Troy," a woman's voice screamed. Henna's heart skipped a beat. She hesitated, then pushed the door open, her footsteps light on the floorboards as she moved deeper into the house. Inside, the scene was chaotic. Troy stood in the living room, his face red with fury, while a woman, his girlfriend maybe, stood with her back to Henna, hands shaking. "You're going to pay for this," Troy shouted, his fists clenched, as he advanced toward the woman. Henna's body froze. This was it. This was her chance. But she wasn't prepared for the overwhelming wave of disgust and fear that washed over her. Troy was indeed the man she had been thinking about. The cruel, violent man who had shown no mercy to anyone. But she had never seen him this furious, this dangerous. Her pulse quickened. Henna couldn't help but feel that if she didn't act soon, she would lose her nerve, and the curse would claim Mia. With trembling hands, she reached for the knife she had brought, her fingers cold against the steel. But just as she raised it, the woman turned around. "Who the hell are you?" the woman demanded, her eyes wide with fear. Before Henna could speak, the woman's eyes narrowed in recognition. "You're the woman from the diner. You've been following Troy, haven't you?" I have to do this," Henna whispered, her voice thick with uncertainty. The reality of the moment hit her hard, and she dropped the knife at her side, unable to go through with it. Troy turned to face her, his eyes filled with a menacing fury. "You're in the wrong place, lady. Leave now before I make you regret it." Fear gripped Henna's chest as she stood frozen. She had to do this. There was no other way. But the blood was still rushing to her head, and she couldn't seem to breathe. Henna's hands shook violently as Troy advanced on her. The woman stood behind him, watching in silence, her eyes filled with a strange understanding, as if she knew what Henna was going through. "Do you think you can come here and just take my life?" Troy spat, his voice full of venom. "I won't let you do it. I'm not here to—" Henna began, but she was cut off as Troy lunged toward her. The force of his movement knocked her to the ground, and the knife clattered from her hand. In the brief moment of vulnerability, Hannah felt the cold grip of fear tighten around her chest. She was powerless. There was nothing she could do against this man. Nothing she could do to save Mia if she didn't act. Her thoughts raced as Troy loomed over her, his anger blinding him to the desperation in her eyes. "You're making a huge mistake," Hannah gasped, trying to push him off, but he was too strong. "I'm not your enemy. I have no choice." Troy's laughter echoed around the room, dark and cruel. "No choice? Of course you do. You always have a choice." He leaned closer, his breath hot against her face. "But you're too weak to understand it." As he raised his fist, ready to strike, a terrifying realization hit Hannah. She had crossed a threshold, and now there was no going back. In this world of horror, choices were illusions. What came next would be a matter of life and death. In a desperate final attempt, Hannah kicked out, sending Troy stumbling backward. She scrambled to her feet, and in the chaos, her hand found the knife once more. Without thinking, she swung it toward Troy, the blade cutting through the air with terrifying precision. The silence in the room was deafening. Hannah stood panting, her chest rising and falling as she stared at the body of Troy Benson lying on the floor, blood pooling beneath him. His eyes stared blankly at the ceiling. The man she had just killed, a testament to the bargain she had been forced to make. She could hardly breathe as she staggered backward, the knife slipping from her hand. The horror of what she had done crashed over her in waves, suffocating her. She had killed him. She had taken a life, and in doing so, had paid the price to save her daughter. But was it enough? The answer came swiftly. A soft, unearthly whisper filled the room, and the temperature in the air dropped. Hannah spun around, her eyes wide with terror, but there was no one there. The shadows seemed to move of their own accord, growing darker, heavier. Mia. She had to get back to her daughter. Hannah raced back to the trailer, fear mounting with each step. She could feel the air grow colder around her, and every shadow seemed to twist in unnatural shapes. She was sure that the curse was not done with her. Not yet. When she reached the trailer, she found Mia still lying on the couch, her breathing shallow but steady. For a moment, Hannah thought she had made it. She had done the impossible. But then Mia's eyes snapped open, wide with terror. "No, Mommy, no! The man! He's coming!" Mia screamed, her voice filled with pure, unadulterated fear. Hannah froze in place, her heart pounding in her chest. The price of salvation had been paid. But in the world of curses, no one could escape unscathed. Hannah couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The darkness in the room seemed to press against her, as if the very walls were closing in. Mia's screams echoed in her mind, the fear in her daughter's voice pulling her back to reality. "What's happening to her?" Hannah whispered, panic rising in her chest. She rushed to Mia's side, but her daughter's eyes were filled with terror, her hands clutching at her throat as if she were choking on the air itself. "I told you, Mommy. I told you!" Mia gasped, her voice breaking. "He's here! The man, he's coming!" Hannah's heart skipped a beat. Was it Troy? The thought filled her with dread, but deep down, she knew it wasn't just him. It was something darker, something ancient. "Stay with me, Mia. Stay calm," Hannah urged, trying to steady her breathing as she held her daughter close. But her efforts were in vain. The temperature in the trailer dropped sharply, and the faint whisper of a voice, familiar yet distorted, seemed to surround them. "Your sacrifice is not enough." The voice was chilling, not of Troy, but of something far more sinister. Hannah's pulse raced as she stood, her eyes darting to every corner of the room. The shadows were thickening, swirling into grotesque shapes that seemed to move on their own. Hannah could feel her skin prickle as if something unseen were watching them. "Who's there?" she demanded. trying to keep her voice steady. She tried to push Mia behind her, but her daughter refused to move, still gasping for air. A cold wind blew through the cracks in the trailer, despite the windows being sealed tight. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as though they were coming from within her own mind. You took a life to save a life, but you did not fulfill the bargain. You will pay the price. Hannah's stomach churned. The curse. She had known it wouldn't be that simple. No deal with dark forces ever. Was, but the weight of her mistake now felt unbearable. What do you want from me? Hannah cried out, her voice desperate. The shadows seemed to shift around them, drawing closer. The air grew thick with malevolent energy, and for a moment, Hannah could see the faint outline of a figure, a man, standing just outside the door of the trailer. She felt an overwhelming sense of dread flood her chest. It was Troy. No, it was something worse than Troy. Something that had been awakened by the bloodshed. The door slammed open, and a gust of freezing air filled the room. Hannah turned to see the figure of a man, an ancient being, tall and gaunt, his eyes glowing with a supernatural fire. He was not Troy, but something far older. His face was twisted in an expression of cruel amusement. "I am the one who controls what you have unleashed," he said, his voice low and filled with power. Hannah's blood ran cold. "What? What are you?" she stammered, struggling to hold on to Mia, who was now trembling violently. "I am the one who governs life and death," the figure said, stepping forward. "You have invoked my power, and now you must face the consequences. The man you killed was merely a pawn in the grand game." Hannah shook her head in disbelief. "But I didn't know. I didn't know what would happen." The figure's smile was cold. "It matters not what you know. You have chosen, and the choices have consequences." Hannah stepped back, trying to shield Mia from the malevolent presence that filled the room. "What do you want from us?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Nothing more than what you've already given," the figure replied, his gaze shifting to Mia. "The child must die." "It is the price for your salvation!" Hannah gasped, her heart shattering at the thought. "No, please!" she cried out, falling to her knees. "I will do anything! Please don't take her from me!" The figure's eyes glowed brighter, and his laugh echoed through the room like the sound of distant thunder. "It is not within your power to undo what has been done. The curse is upon you." Hannah sat by Mia's side, watching her daughter's face twist in pain, as the supernatural presence in the room grew stronger. It was no longer a choice of life or death. It was the inevitable clash between her maternal love and the forces she had unleashed. Mia's breath came in ragged gasps, each inhale a struggle as if something was choking the very life out of her. "No," Hannah whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. She reached out, placing her hand on Mia's forehead, trying to comfort her, trying to do something to ease the suffering. But she couldn't. There was nothing she could do. The man, the figure in the doorway, was right. The deal had been made. The price had been paid. Hannah could feel the weight of her choices pressing down on her, suffocating her. She had made the ultimate sacrifice for her daughter's life. But now, she was being forced to pay it back in a way that would rip her apart. Mia's body convulsed violently, her screams growing more desperate with each passing moment. The room seemed to warp and stretch around them as the supernatural force closed in. Hannah was losing her grip, losing her ability to reason. The whispers were deafening now, swirling around her in a cacophony of tortured voices. "Please," Hannah begged, her voice breaking. "I'll do anything. Just save her." But the figure didn't answer. He didn't need to. He knew the answer. Mia's screams reached a fever pitch, her body twisting and contorting in unnatural ways. Henna could do nothing but watch as her daughter was consumed by the curse, her life force slipping away like sand through her fingers. In the final moment, just as Henna thought she would lose everything, the shadows shifted again. The figure stepped forward, his hand outstretched. "The deal is done," he said, his voice cold and final. "Your daughter is no longer your concern." Henna's heart shattered as the figure's hand touched Mia, and her daughter's body went limp. In her arms, "No," Henna cried, but the figure's presence seemed to swallow her cry whole. Mia was gone, lost to the curse, and Henna was left with nothing but her own broken soul. In the days that followed, Henna was left alone in the trailer. Mia was gone, and the world outside felt alien, distant. The curse had claimed her child, and now it sought to claim her as well. She could feel the presence of the figure, always watching, always waiting. No matter how hard she tried, Henna could not escape the suffocating grip of the darkness. The whispers never stopped. The shadows never left. She was no longer just haunted by the loss of Mia. She was haunted by the knowledge that the curse had taken everything from her. As time wore on, Henna began to lose her mind. She could feel herself slipping away, the terror and grief threatening to swallow her whole. Her last thought, as the final strands of her sanity unraveled, was a simple truth. There was no escape. There never had been. The days blurred into nights, and Henna could no longer distinguish reality from the haunting visions that plagued her. She had been living in a nightmare since Mia's death, haunted by the supernatural forces that twisted her mind and corrupted her every waking thought. The entity, the man who had claimed Mia's life, never left her side. It was as if it had become part of her, a malignant presence that weighed her down with guilt, fear, and hopelessness. The whispers never stopped. They filled her thoughts, growing louder with each passing day, making it impossible for her to think clearly. But Henna knew she couldn't continue like this. She couldn't let the darkness consume her completely. She had to try to confront the entity, even if it meant losing herself in the process. "I won't let you win," she whispered to the shadows that surrounded her. "I won't let you take everything from me." The words felt hollow, as if they didn't come from her own mouth. The entity had twisted her thoughts, and she knew it. But she had to fight, even if it was futile, even if she had no strength left. In a moment of desperation, Henna grabbed a knife from the kitchen, the cold steel pressing into her palm as she made her way toward the darkened corner of the trailer. There, she had seen the figure before. The man who had taken Mia. He was waiting. When Henna entered the corner, the shadows shifted, and she saw the man standing before her. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and his smile twisted with cruel amusement. "You still think you can escape me?" the figure asked, his voice deep and filled with mockery. Henna's hand tightened around the knife. "I'm not afraid of you anymore. You've taken everything. Now I'll take something from you." The figure's laugh echoed in the room, sending chills down her spine. "You have no power here," he said, his voice seeping into her mind, distorting her thoughts. "You are mine. All of you." Henna's grip on the knife wavered, but she forced herself to stand tall. She had nothing left to lose. "I will never be yours," she spat, her voice shaking with both fear and defiance. With a flick of his wrist, the figure moved closer to Henna, his cold breath washing over her. "You have no choice," he said, his voice a whisper in her ear. Suddenly, the shadows around them shifted again, and Henna found herself surrounded by a dark mist. The figure's form began to distort, becoming an amorphous shape, something even more terrifying than the man she had been facing. She could feel her strength waning. The curse had drained her, and she was on the brink of collapse. But she refused to give in. She refused to let her daughter's death be in vain. In one final surge of defiance, Henna lunged at the figure, the knife slicing through the air. But the figure was faster. He caught her wrist before the blade could reach him, twisting her arm painfully. "You are weak," the figure hissed, his voice now an agonizing screech. "You cannot defeat me." The shadows closed in tighter, and Henna felt herself being pulled into the darkness. She could see Mia's face, pale, lifeless, and trapped in the same void. Henna's heart broke, and the terror of losing her again almost overwhelmed her. But something inside Henna snapped. The love for her daughter, the desire for redemption, burned brighter than the entity's darkness. She clenched her teeth, ignoring the pain, and wrenched herself free from the figure's grasp. "Leave me alone!" she screamed, her voice a raw cry of fury. "I won't let you have her!" The figure recoiled, his form flickering with rage. The shadows recoiled as well, as if they were being repelled by her force of will. Henna's eyes blazed with fury and grief, and for a moment she felt a surge of power that she had not known before. In a last, desperate attempt to end the nightmare, Henna thrust the knife into the figure's chest. But it wasn't just a physical blow. It was an act of defiance, a refusal to accept her fate. It was a final act of love for Mia, and for herself. The figure let out an otherworldly scream, his form disintegrating into smoke and shadows. The room shook, and the air grew thick with tension. The darkness pressed in on Henna, but she stood, tall, the knife still in her hand. For a moment the world went silent. Henna stood alone in the center of the trailer, her breath ragged as the remnants of the darkness around her began to dissipate. The air was still cold, but the oppressive weight that had been pressing on her chest for so long had lifted. The figure was gone, but Mia was still gone as well. Henna knew that the curse had taken its toll, and no matter what she did, Mia could never come back. She had tried, she had fought with everything she had, but in the end, the price had been too high. As the darkness faded, Henna sank to her knees, the knife slipping from her grasp. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered her daughter's name, her heart breaking all over again. But despite the grief, despite the loss, there was something else, a sense of relief. She had confronted the entity, she had fought it, and in the end, she had freed herself from its grip, even if it meant carrying the weight of her actions for the rest of her life. She had broken the curse. The days following Henna's confrontation with the entity were quiet, eerily quiet. The shadows were gone, and the whispers had stopped. But the silence felt like a void, a reminder of everything she had lost. She sat alone in the trailer, her hands shaking as she looked around at the remnants of the life she had once known. The place was empty now, stripped of its former life, a cold shell of what it had been. Henna knew she had no choice but to move forward. She couldn't undo what had happened, but she could try to make peace with herself. She could try to find a way to live with the choices she had made and the sacrifices she had endured. As she looked out the window, the sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Henna took a deep breath, knowing that while the darkness had been defeated, the scars would remain. And in the distance, she could almost hear Mia's laughter, a distant, fleeting memory of the daughter she had loved. Months had passed since Henna's final confrontation with the entity that had haunted her. The world outside her trailer had moved on, indifferent to the horrors she had faced. But for Henna, time seemed to stand still. The trailer was no longer a prison. It had become a place of reflection. She had cleaned up the remnants of the madness that had overtaken it. There were no more whispers or shadows, but the absence of the terror left a different kind of emptiness. The house, once a symbol of torment, had become a sanctuary for her grieving soul. But even as the physical remnants of the curse faded, Henna couldn't escape the mental scars. She had defeated the entity, but she had paid the ultimate price. Mia was gone, and there were no easy answers to fill the void she had left behind. Every morning, Henna awoke to the quiet emptiness of the house. She no longer heard Mia's voice, nor did she find her daughter's toys scattered about. The laughter and chatter had been replaced by the eerie silence of solitude. It was a silence that echoed in her bones and rattled her mind. But with time, Henna began to embrace a painful realization. There would be no closure. She could never undo what had happened. Mia's death would forever be a shadow that loomed over her, and she would have to find a way to live with it. One morning, after another restless night, Henna sat in front of the window. She gazed out at the vast, empty expanse of desert that surrounded the trailer. The sun was just beginning to rise, and the light cast a warm glow over the barren landscape. It was beautiful in its desolation. She had survived. She had faced her deepest fears, and emerged on the other side, broken but alive. And for the first time in months, Henna felt a flicker of hope. A small, fragile thing, but one that was enough to sustain her. "I'll find a way," she whispered to herself. "I'll keep going. For her." The road ahead was long, and Henna knew that healing would take time. She had lost so much, but there was still a part of her left. A part that was determined to honor Mia's memory, even if that meant carrying the pain for the rest of her life. Life had a strange way of moving forward, even when you didn't feel ready to move with it. Henna had learned to cope with her grief, but it was a delicate balance. Some days she was overwhelmed by the loss, and other days she found solace in the quiet moments. But then, one afternoon, a visitor arrived. It was a knock at the door that startled Henna. She hadn't expected anyone. She slowly made her way to the door, her heart racing as she opened it to reveal a figure standing on her doorstep. It was a man, tall, with dark hair and a kind face. He looked familiar, but Henna couldn't quite place him. "Can I help you?" Henna asked, her voice hesitant. The man smiled softly. "I'm sorry to bother you. I'm Ethan. I used to know Mia. I heard what happened, and I wanted to check in on you." Henna's heart skipped a beat. Ethan was a childhood friend of Mia's, someone she had met during her daughter's early years. The memories came flooding back. The laughter, the games, the sense of normalcy before the darkness had settled in. I didn't expect anyone to come here," Henna said, her voice shaky. "I'm sorry. It's been a hard time." Ethan nodded, his expression compassionate. "I understand, but I've been thinking about you. You shouldn't be alone." Henna hesitated before stepping aside to let him in. It had been a long time since she had seen someone from Mia's past. Ethan's presence brought a strange comfort, but it also stirred up memories she wasn't sure she was ready to confront. They sat in silence for a moment, both unsure of what to say. Finally, Henna spoke. Do you think she's still out there?" Her voice trembled as she spoke her deepest fear. Ethan looked at her with a somber expression. "I don't know, but I think she's at peace now." Henna swallowed hard. "I couldn't save her." "You did everything you could," Ethan said gently. "You fought for her, Henna, and you gave her everything. Don't ever doubt that." Tears welled in Henna's eyes as she looked at the man who had known Mia. She felt the weight of the grief that had consumed her for so long, but she also felt something else. A quiet understanding, a recognition that maybe, just maybe, she could find peace. The weeks that followed Ethan's visit were marked by small, tentative steps toward healing. Henna didn't rush into anything. She took her time, allowing herself the space to process everything that had happened. She wasn't the same person she had been before Mia's death, but she was learning how to exist in a world without her daughter. Ethan continued to visit, his presence offering a quiet comfort. Slowly they began to talk about Mia, sharing memories of her in a way that didn't feel as painful. Hannah was beginning to remember the joy, not just the sorrow. One day, as Hannah was going through Maya's things, she found an old photograph of the two of them. Mia was laughing, her face bright with the innocence of childhood. Hannah smiled through her tears as she held the photograph to her chest. "I'll carry you with me always, my love," she whispered. "Always." It was in that moment that Hannah realized something important. She couldn't undo the past, but she could choose how to move forward. She could honor Maya's memory, not by living in the past, but by finding a way to live for the future. She didn't have to forget the darkness. It would always be there, lurking in the shadows of her mind, but she could choose to find light in the cracks, to rebuild the pieces of her life that had been shattered. Hannah wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of hope. She had survived, and she would continue to survive. It had been a year since Hannah had faced the entity that had haunted her. A year since she had buried her daughter's memory in the desert sands, knowing that the past would never truly leave her. On the anniversary of Mia's death, Hannah visited her daughter's grave, a small, quiet place just outside the town, near the edge of the desert. She knelt down beside the headstone, her fingers brushing the cold stone. "I miss you, Mia," Hannah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I will never stop loving you." For a moment, the world felt still, as if time itself had paused in respect. Hannah closed her eyes and took a deep breath, letting go of the fear, the guilt, the anger that had consumed her for so long. And as she stood up, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. It wasn't an end, but a beginning. Hannah had broken the curse, and now she would find a way to live again. The sea was an unforgiving master. It clawed at our small boat, tossing it like a toy in the hands of some cruel, unseen force. Rain lashed against my face, the salt burning my eyes, but I kept my grip firm on the edge of the wooden vessel as we neared the shore. "Keep your damn hand steady, boy," growled Nolan Grayson, the man I'd be sharing this forsaken rock with for the next 4 weeks. His thick beard dripped with seawater, his eyes hidden beneath the brim of his tattered cap. He handled the boat with an ease that only years of experience could grant, while I, despite my best efforts, felt utterly useless against the rage of the ocean. The lighthouse loomed ahead, a towering beast of stone and iron, its single eye staring blankly into the gray, storm-choked sky. Waves crashed violently against the jagged cliffs that surrounded the island, sending white sprays high into the air. It looked like a place forgotten by time, untouched by man, except for that damned light pulsing like a heartbeat in the storm. We reached the dock, our boots sinking into the damp, rotting wood as we climbed out. The wind howled, carrying with it the scent of salt, mildew, and something else, something foul, something dead. Nolan turned to me. "Rules are simple, lad. You follow orders. You don't ask questions. And you—" He jabbed a thick, calloused finger in my direction. "Stay the hell away from the lantern room unless I say otherwise." I nodded, swallowing down the questions that burned on my tongue. As we trudged up the worn stone steps to the lighthouse, I couldn't shake the feeling that the island itself was watching me. Inside, the lighthouse was a prison of damp walls and narrow staircases. The air was thick with the scent of burning oil, rust, and old seawater. The only warmth came from the small stove in the kitchen, its fire struggling to stay alive against the cold that seeped into everything. Nolan wasted no time laying out the expectations. I keep the log. I tend the lantern. You do the grunt. Work. Cleaning, repairs, hauling coal. You keep the damn gulls off the roof. You keep the place in order, and at night you don't wander. Why not? I asked before I could stop myself. He shot me a look, dark and unreadable. Because this island don't like wanderers. I laughed, thinking it was one of those superstitions old sailors carried with them. But Nolan didn't laugh. The first few days passed in brutal monotony. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. But something felt wrong. At night the wind didn't just howl, it muttered, a low, guttural whisper beneath the crashing of waves. I'd lie in my cot, staring at the cracked ceiling, convinced I could hear something just beyond my room. A slow, deliberate creaking, like footsteps on damp wood. Then there were the gulls. The fog never left the island. It clung to the rocks like a living thing, swallowing the shoreline, blurring the edges of the world. Some days, I could barely see the lighthouse from the keeper's quarters just a few yards away. It made the place feel smaller, like the island itself was shrinking, dissolving into the mist. Nolan never seemed bothered by it. He would sit outside on the steps, pipe clenched between his teeth, staring out at nothing. "The fog don't come for me," he said once. "Just for you." I laughed. "What the hell does that mean?" He didn't answer. That night, I woke up to the sound of my own voice. I sat up in my cot, heart hammering. The room was dark, save for the thin silver of moonlight leaking through the cracks in the wooden shutters. Then I heard it again. A whisper, low, garbled, coming from outside the window. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my bare feet hitting the cold wooden floor. My body felt sluggish, like I was wading through deep water. I pulled the shutters open. The fog had thickened into an almost solid wall outside. And then, a shape. A figure standing just beyond the glass, looking in at me. The breath caught in my throat. It was me. I staggered back, knocking over the chair by the desk. My double didn't move, didn't blink, just stared, blank-faced, empty-eyed. I scrambled for the door, wrenching it open. The figure was gone. Only the swirling mist remained. I didn't tell Nolan. What would I say? I saw myself outside last night? I think I'm losing my mind? Instead, I buried myself in work. Hauling coal to the furnace, scrubbing floors, keeping the damned gulls off the roof. Anything to keep my hands moving, to keep my mind from unraveling. One afternoon, while Nolan was tending the lantern, I found an old logbook stuffed into the back of a drawer in the kitchen. The pages were yellowed, the ink faded with time. Flipped through it. June 3rd, 1872. Keeper Isaiah Warren missing. Boat never arrived. June 7th, 1872. I hear footsteps at night, but I know I am alone. June 12th, 1872. I saw myself outside today. June 15th, 1872. The light watches me. The light wants me. I stopped. My blood ran cold. That was my handwriting, but that was impossible. The ink was faded with age, the pages brittle beneath my fingers. I turned the book over, checking the cover. The name scrawled on the front was barely legible. James Harper. My name. Things shifted after that. Doors that led to one room yesterday led somewhere else today. The kitchen window, which once faced the sea, now faced the cliffs. The stairs to the lantern room felt longer, steeper, twisting in impossible ways. One night, I went to the supply room to fetch a lamp. When I turned back, the door was gone. Vanished. I pounded on the walls, shouting for Nolan. No answer. After what felt like hours, I collapsed against the cold stone. My head throbbed. My mouth was dry. The only sound was the distant wail of the wind, then a voice. "You were never meant to leave." I spun around. No one was there. I started avoiding mirrors. Every time I caught my reflection, something was wrong. The man staring back at me didn't move at the same time I did. Sometimes he blinked too late. Sometimes his mouth lagged behind mine. And once, just once, he smiled at me when I didn't smile at all. I smashed the mirror in my quarters that night. Nolan didn't ask why. He just muttered, "Took you long enough." The storm hit on the 21st, night. Wind screamed through the cracks in the walls. The sea churned violently, waves crashing against the cliffs, sending salt spray high into the air. The lighthouse groaned under the force of the gale. Nolan sat at the kitchen table, calm as ever, sipping his whiskey. I couldn't sit still. My skin felt too tight. My head ached with some unbearable pressure, like something was pressing against my skull, trying to get in. "I don't remember coming here," I blurted out suddenly. Nolan didn't look up. "No one does." "I mean it," I insisted. "I remember being here, but I don't remember before. Where I came from, how I got the job." Nolan exhaled slowly, setting his glass down. "You don't get it, do you?" I stared at him. "Get what?" He looked at me then. Really looked at me. And I saw something in his eyes I couldn't understand. "James," he said, his voice low. "You have always been here." I ran. I don't know why, but I ran. Out of the kitchen, down the corridor, up the winding staircase toward the lantern room. I wasn't thinking. My heart pounded. My breath came in ragged gasps. I reached the top, flinging open the heavy iron door, and froze. Nolan was already there, standing by the lantern, his back to me. But I had just left him downstairs. Slowly, he turned. It wasn't Nolan. It was someone who looked like him, and when he spoke, his voice came from inside my head. "You are not supposed to be here yet." The world tilted. My vision blurred. The last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed me was the light, pulsing, shifting, opening like an eye, watching me. Days blurred into nights, and the island felt as though it had swallowed time itself. I couldn't tell if it was the wind or something more sinister, something alive, lurking in the walls of the lighthouse. At night, I would lie in bed, eyes wide open, listening to the faint scratching. It started low, a soft tapping, almost like nails on wood. But then it would grow louder, like something crawling beneath the floorboards, pushing against the walls. The sound was maddening. I asked Nolan about it once, but he only gave me one of his strange, unreadable looks. The house is old. Old houses make noises. But this wasn't a house. Noise. This was something else, something watching. It wasn't just the walls. The lighthouse itself seemed to be watching me. Every time I looked at the light, it felt as though it was staring back, its beam cutting through the fog like a sharp knife. But when I turned away, I could feel it following me, no matter where. I went. One evening, I went up to the lantern room, my heart pounding in my chest. I thought it might help to tend to the light, something to take my mind off the crawling paranoia. But when I reached the top, Nolan wasn't there. Instead, there was a man, a figure cloaked in shadows, standing silently next to the lantern. I blinked. The man was gone. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Things began to change. The world warped. The shadows in the lighthouse grew longer, darker. The stairs seemed to stretch unnaturally as I climbed them. The air became thick, heavier, as though the island itself was pressing in on me, suffocating me. One afternoon, I took a walk along the rocky shore. The waves crashed violently, but there was no sound of the gulls, no calls to be heard. It felt wrong. As I stood there staring out at the endless sea, something pulled at me. An odd compulsion, an urge I couldn't explain. I stepped toward the edge, my feet dragging me closer to the cliff's edge. Just as I was about to take another step forward, I felt a hand grab my shoulder. It was Nolan. "Don't," he said quietly. "Don't listen to it." I pulled away. "What are you talking about?" His eyes were dark, haunted. "The island speaks to you. It calls you." "Calls me?" I repeated. Nolan didn't answer. He simply turned and began walking back to the lighthouse, his footsteps echoing in the silence. That night, sleep never came. I kept seeing the same images, flashing behind my eyelids, things that shouldn't be real. A dark figure standing at the foot of my bed, watching me. The face was twisted, its eyes black pools of void, its mouth gaping, hollow. It didn't speak, but I could feel it, reaching for me. Every time I shut my eyes, it came closer. At dawn, I sat up in bed, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. The silence of the lighthouse felt suffocating. I couldn't tell what was real anymore. The dreams, the visions, the whispers, they were becoming one with the waking world. I went to the logbook to record the events, hoping to make sense of them. But when I opened the book, there were new entries. I heard the light calling to me. "Tonight. It is alive. The walls move when you aren't looking. Don't let it see you look away." I stared at the words, feeling my stomach churn. Was this me, or had something else taken over? The days grew colder, the fog denser. It felt as though the world was shrinking. And still, the light continued its relentless watch. One evening, as I went to fill the lantern with oil, I noticed something strange. There was a crack in the glass, not just a small crack, but a long, jagged line running from top to bottom. I froze. This wasn't from the storm. This wasn't from anything natural. The crack looked intentional. I ran my hand across the cold surface, my fingers brushing the edges of the glass. That's when I saw it. The faintest shimmer in the air, just beyond the lantern. A figure. It was faint, translucent, but I could see it clearly now. Standing just beyond the light, a shadow of a man with no face. I stumbled back, but the figure didn't move. It only stood there, watching. A voice, low, gravelly, whispered in my ear. "You are meant to stay here." Nolan didn't speak to me much anymore. He spent his days in silence, staring at the light. It was as though the man I once knew had vanished, and in his place, only a hollow shell remained. I began to hear him at night, muttering to himself in his sleep, not in words, but in fragments of sounds, incoherent, guttural growls. And sometimes, when I passed by his room, I saw him standing by the window, staring out into the fog. He was not himself anymore. One night, I woke up to find the lantern room, door wide open, the light glowing brighter than I'd ever seen it. I couldn't stay away. I had to see what was inside. But when I reached the top of the tower, I was not prepared for what I found. The room was empty. The lantern was burning with an unnatural intensity, but Nolan was gone. There was only a smudge on the floor, a single dark footprint leading to the edge of the platform. I looked over the edge, into the fog. and I saw him, standing at the edge of the cliff, staring up at the lighthouse. I could feel the island's presence pressing in on me. I could feel it pulling me toward the edge. The last thought that crossed my mind before I blacked out was the realization that I was never meant to leave. I can't stop thinking about the lighthouse. The light. It feels alive. Every time I walk past it, I swear I hear it whispering to me, calling my name, urging me closer. Nolan is gone. I don't know where he's gone. One moment he was there, standing at the window, watching the fog, and the next, he vanished. The only trace left behind is a faint smell of burning oil, and the echo of his voice, distant and hollow, calling my name. I feel it. The island is calling me too. I don't know how much longer I can fight it. I sit here now, in my room, writing this. My hands shaking as I try to make sense of what's happening. The room feels colder. The walls feel closer. I can hear the whispers again. The island is no longer a place. It's a presence. The fog, the sea, the lighthouse. Everything is a part of it. I tried to leave once. I made my way down the stairs, through the narrow corridor and out the door, hoping to escape the suffocating grasp of the island. But each step felt like I was walking through thick air, something pressing down on me, forcing me back. The wind howled, but I couldn't hear it above the louder voices in my head. The island's heartbeat, the light's pulse. I don't know how long I walked. Hours, days, or maybe just minutes. Time doesn't matter here. What matters is that I couldn't leave. The island wouldn't let me. I collapsed at the base of the lighthouse, my legs trembling, my body weak from exhaustion. The light above me flickered as if it was watching me, waiting. I began to notice things I hadn't before, details that were impossible to ignore. The floorboards in the lighthouse creaked with a rhythm, a pattern, like a heartbeat. When I walked across them, they seemed to pulse under my weight, as though the lighthouse was alive. I tried to push it out of my mind, but it was always there, lurking in the back of my thoughts. One evening, I ventured down into the cellar. The darkness swallowed me whole, the smell of rot clinging to the air. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel it, something moving in the shadows. A cold wind blew through the cracks in the walls, and then, suddenly, there was a voice. "You're not alone." I spun around, my breath caught in my throat. There was nothing, no one, but I could feel the presence. It was in the room with me, watching me. I backed away, stumbling toward the stairs, but the shadows seemed to follow me, closing in. The walls were alive, breathing, pulsing, drawing me deeper into their grasp. I found Nolan. Not in the way I expected, not in any way I could understand. He wasn't alive. He wasn't dead. I stumbled across him while wandering through the lighthouse. He was standing in the same place he'd been for days now, by the window, staring out into the endless fog. His eyes were empty, hollow. I called his name, but he didn't respond. I reached out to touch him, and his skin was cold, lifeless. But his eyes, they weren't dead. There was something dark inside them. He turned slowly, his face twisted in an expression of pure terror. And then, for the first time in days, he spoke. The light. It won't let us go. His voice was weak, a whisper in the dead silence of the lighthouse. "It's too late," he continued. "We are part of it now. There's no escape." His gaze turned back to the light. "It's calling you too. I don't know how much longer I can hold on to my sanity. The walls are closing in. The air is thick with whispers. The fog presses against the windows, its presence suffocating. I can feel it, the void, waiting to swallow me whole. The island has become my prison, and the light, that burning, unblinking eye, is its jailer. I thought I saw Nolan again tonight, but he wasn't the same. His form flickered in the corner of my vision, a shadow of something that wasn't human anymore. His eyes were nothing but black pits. His mouth was a gaping void. He spoke, but it wasn't his voice. It was something darker, something that shouldn't exist. You will join us. You will become one with the light. I ran. I ran as fast as I could through the halls, down the stairs, out into the open. But the island was always there, pressing on me, dragging me back. I collapsed in front of the lighthouse, my breath ragged, my heart pounding. But it didn't matter. The island had won. I could feel the light, the pulse, the call. It was inside, me now. There was no escape. The darkness is closing in, the light is fading, but I don't know if I want to escape anymore. I think I've finally come to understand. The island doesn't want to kill us. It wants to consume us, to take us into the light, to join us with whatever lies beyond. It's not a curse, not a punishment. It's an invitation. An invitation to become part of the void, to become one with the island. I think I hear Nolan's voice now. He's in the light. He's calling me. I can feel it. The light is waiting for me. I can't fight it anymore. I don't know how much time has passed since Nolan vanished, or since I first saw the flickering light calling to me. Days, weeks, the fog never lifts, the wind never stops. It's as though the island has swallowed everything, every measure of time, every thread of life. There's nothing left but the light. I can still hear it, even when I try to sleep. The whispers, the faint sound of footsteps on the stairs, the scratching at the door. Sometimes I hear Nolan's voice again, calling me from beyond the walls, but it's always followed by that eerie, hollow laugh that chills me to the bone. Know what's happening. I know it. I've seen the signs. The light is trying to take me, to pull me into it. I can feel it reaching out, wrapping around me like a net, and I can't escape. The lighthouse is changing. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's as if the very structure of the place is alive. The walls shift in the dead of night. The beams creak with an unnatural rhythm, and the light. Oh, the light. It calls to me even more insistently now. It's like it knows that I'm slipping, that my resolve is weakening. Try to confront it today. I climbed to the top of the lighthouse, determined to shut it off, to destroy the source of my madness. But when I reached the top, I couldn't do it. The light. It was too bright, too powerful. It reached into my mind and twisted it. It spoke to me, and I understood its message. You are mine. I couldn't pull myself away. The light has infected my mind, my body, my soul. It's become a part of me. There are shadows now. At first, I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks on me. But no. It's real. There are figures moving in the fog, lurking just beyond the edge of my vision. They never come close enough for me to make out their faces, but I know they're there. The shadows are waiting, waiting for me to join them. I tried to follow them once, to understand what they wanted, but as I stepped outside, a cold, suffocating wind blew through me, stopping me dead in my tracks. The shadows shrieked, their forms flickering and dissolving into the air, but I heard their voices, whispering in the darkness. Soon, I can't escape them. They're in the walls, in the light, in the air I breathe. They're everywhere. I've lost track of how long I've been here, how many nights I've spent wandering the halls of the lighthouse, lost. I've tried to make sense of it all, tried to find some meaning in the madness, but there's nothing. The island is endless. The light is eternal. I think I'm going mad. My own thoughts are foreign to me now. The more I think, the more the darkness creeps in. The whispers have become louder, more insistent, until they drown out everything else. I don't even recognize my own voice anymore when I speak. Nolan's face haunts me in my dreams. He's standing at the top of the lighthouse, staring out at the sea, but there's something wrong with him. His eyes are black, his skin is pale, as though he's been drained of life. When he speaks, his voice is a rasping whisper, echoing from the depths of the void. You will join me. You will be one with the light. The truth is clear now. The light is not a lighthouse at all. It's a portal, a gateway to something ancient, something horrible. The island itself is not merely a place. It is a living organism. The lighthouse is its eye, its heart, its soul. It feeds off of our fear, our terror, our madness. It has been waiting for centuries, patiently biding its time, drawing souls in to feed its endless hunger. I see it now. The island's purpose. The light was never meant to guide ships. It was meant to consume. I am its latest victim. I can feel it wrapping around my thoughts, devouring me from within. The moment I close my eyes, I feel its presence, its grip tightening on my mind. And Nolan is already lost. He's no longer human. He is a puppet, a mere vessel for the island's will. He is a part of the light now, and soon I will be too. I am beyond saving. I've tried everything to break free. Tried to escape the island. Tried to shut off the light. Tried to flee into the sea. But it doesn't matter. It never mattered. I've become part of the island now, just as Nolan has. The whispers have stopped, the shadows have faded. There is no more light. There is only darkness. I know what will happen next. The island will consume me entirely. It will take my soul, my life, and everything I was before, until there is nothing left. But it won't be the end. Because the light is eternal. And once it has consumed me, it will move on to others. The cycle will continue. The island will never be empty. It will always be hungry. I'm not sure if this is real anymore. Time has become a blur. What is real? What is imagined? The fog presses in, suffocating me with its cold touch. I no longer feel the wind. It's as if everything is frozen. The lighthouse stands silent, its beam of light now steady, unwavering. But there is no warmth, no guide. It only pulls. It only consumes. I've reached the end. I know it now. There is no escape. The island has me. I've seen it in my dreams, in the visions that torment my every waking hour. The light is not a blessing. It is a curse, a lure to draw the unwary into its fold. I stand at the top of the lighthouse, staring out at the vast, empty ocean, wondering if anyone will ever see this place, if anyone will come. But I know they won't. The island is cursed, and once you step foot here, you never leave. There is no way out. Only the endless night. I'm losing myself. I can feel it slipping away. My thoughts no longer belong to me. They are tangled, twisted, consumed by the island's influence. It speaks to me. Its voice a low hum in the back of my mind, always present, always watching. I see Nolan now, not as he was, but as something else. Something changed. His eyes are hollow, his skin stretched tight over his bones. He doesn't speak anymore. He doesn't need to. He only watches me, his expression unreadable. The light whispers to me that it is his fate, and it is mine. We are its children now. I have become something else, just like him, just like the island. We are one. The boundary between my soul and the island has dissolved, and I am part of its hunger, part of the darkness. I thought I could still fight it. I thought I could still resist. But the choice was never mine to make. The light beckons, pulling me closer, each pulse like a heartbeat in my chest. I can feel it, deep inside my bones, in the marrow of my being. It's taking everything from me. My humanity, my will, my soul. But I'm not alone. Nolan is still here. His shadow, his presence, hanging just at the edge of my perception. I hear him now more clearly than ever. He's not speaking with his mouth. He's speaking through the light. Join us. Become the light. The voice is no longer Nolan as, but something older, something ancient, echoing through the very fabric of the island itself. The light does not just shine, it devours. And now I understand. I am the light. I can feel my mind unraveling. I've tried to hold on. I've tried to keep my grip on reality, but it's slipping through my fingers. The whispers are louder now, echoing in my thoughts like a song I can't escape. I feel the light in my chest, in my very soul. It fills me, consumes me, remakes me. I am becoming one with the island. Nolan is with me now, his face finally clear in my vision. He is not dead. He is not alive. He is a part of this place, a part of the darkness that has consumed him and will consume me too. There is no more distinction between me and the island. I am the island. The light and the darkness are one, and I am nothing without it. The end is near. I stand on the edge of the lighthouse, staring out into the vast nothingness. The sea is dark as the light that calls me. The island beneath my feet is alive, pulsing with energy, pulling me deeper into its heart. There is no escape. I hear the sound of footsteps behind me, but when I turn, no one is there. The shadows are moving again. I know they are watching me, waiting for the final moment. But I am not afraid. I am free. The light is mine. I have become part of the island, part of its endless hunger. I am the lighthouse, and the lighthouse is me. The light will continue to burn, and when it calls to others, they will join us. They will become like Nolan, like me, part of the eternal cycle, and so the island will remain, forever. Tina Walker stood over her workbench, her eyes glued to the small, delicate seedling of Elysia. She had spent years in her lab perfecting this hybrid plant, designed to release a pollen that would make anyone who came into contact with it feel nothing but pure happiness. The world was full of suffering, depression, anxiety, a constant undercurrent of sorrow in people's lives. And she believed Elysia could be the answer. A simple solution, she thought. A flower that could fix the broken parts of humanity. The plant's petals, an unusual combination of crimson and violet hues, shimmered in the laboratory light. Tina had handpicked the genetic modifications, and she was confident in her creation. The preliminary tests showed promise, and she had already spoken to the research facility's higher-ups about funding further trials. Perfect, she muttered, barely able to suppress her excitement. It's going to change everything. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Luke, her colleague and friend. Tina, are you okay? I've been reading the reports. It's too risky, don't you think? We need to proceed with caution. Tina read the message, a slight irritation creeping into her mind. Luke was always the cautious one. He didn't understand her drive. He didn't see the bigger picture. Tina quickly typed a reply. "You're just afraid. Elysia is the future. It's going to help people." Tina glanced at her son Ethan, who was sitting in the living room. He was only 11, but in recent weeks, he'd been quieter than usual. Tina couldn't help but feel a little guilty. Her obsession with her work had kept her away from him more than she'd like to admit. But the idea of Elysia kept her up at night, driving her forward. "Mom, can I see it?" Ethan's voice interrupted her thoughts. Tina looked up to see him standing in the doorway, his bright blue eyes wide with curiosity. Tina smiled warmly. "Of course, come here." Ethan approached the plant with a cautious reverence. He reached out to touch one of the petals, but Tina quickly stopped him. "Not yet," she said softly. "It's not quite ready." He looked disappointed, but didn't protest. Instead, he sat down beside her, glancing from the plant to her face. "Do you think it will really make people happy, Mom?" Ethan asked, his voice low. Tina's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't fully explained the plant's true nature to him, but his question struck her in an odd way. She'd been so focused on the science, on the validation of her work, that she hadn't thought about how it might affect the people around her. "I think it will, Ethan." "It has to," Tina replied softly. But a small flicker of doubt entered her mind. The next day, Tina couldn't help but feel a sense of unease as she prepared for the first test. Luke had been pushing for more tests on the plant's potential side effects, but Tina was too excited to listen. She had already seen the positive results in her preliminary trials. Today would be the day she would present Elysia to the world. As the first person to experience the plant, Tina inhaled deeply from the gentle scent of its pollen, the air thick with its fragrance. Immediately she felt a wave of warmth wash over her, a sense of peace, an overwhelming sense of contentment. For a moment, the chaos of her life seemed to fade into the background. "It works. It really works," she thought. But as the seconds passed, she felt something strange gnawing at the edges of her consciousness. The happiness was there, yes, but it felt hollow, like a shadow lurking beneath the surface. She dismissed it. After all, it was just the initial test. Her colleagues would be next. The world would soon embrace Elysia. That evening, Tina decided to share the plant with Ethan, thinking that it might help him feel more at ease. Ethan had been withdrawn lately, often lost in his own thoughts. Maybe this would lift his spirits. She carefully placed the small pot of Elysia on the table in front of him. "Try it, Ethan. It will make you feel better." Ethan's curiosity was piqued. He reached for the plant and took a deep breath, inhaling the sweet fragrance. Tina waited, eager to see his reaction. At first Ethan smiled, but then his expression shifted. His eyes became glazed, and his smile faded into something unsettling. Tina watched as he sat still, his gaze fixed on the plant. "Ethan?" she asked, her voice tight with worry. But Ethan didn't respond. He simply stared, unblinking, at the plant, as if it held all the answers to the world's problems. Tina's heart sank. What was happening? The next few days brought more confusion. Ethan had become distant, more than just quiet. He seemed to retreat into himself entirely. He no longer played video games, didn't interact with his friends, and barely spoke at all. Tina was deeply concerned, but also conflicted. The plant had given her such a sense of euphoria, yet Ethan's behavior seemed wrong. Luke had begun to push harder for Tina to stop her tests, citing the strange side effects that were becoming more apparent in those who had been exposed to the plant. "We're not sure what's happening, Tina," he'd said in a frantic phone call. "We need to stop. This is too dangerous." But Tina refused to listen. She was determined to see her creation through, no matter what. As the days passed, she noticed other changes as well. People who had been around the plant for even short periods were acting differently. more serene, but eerily detached from their emotions. One night, Tina entered Ethan's room to find him sitting at his desk, staring at a notebook. His face was blank, his eyes hollow. "Ethan?" Tina's voice trembled. "What's going on? You're scaring me." Ethan turned to her slowly, and for the first time in days, he spoke. "I don't need to worry anymore, Mom. I'm happy now. Everything is perfect." Tina froze. The words were unsettling. She had worked so hard for this plant to make people happy, but now she was questioning whether that happiness was worth the price. Tina couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Despite her initial excitement, the plant's success felt like a hollow victory. Ethan's growing detachment and the strange, vacant expressions of her colleagues made her second-guess her creation. She had never imagined Elysia would affect people like this, but Tina dismissed her fears. "It's just a phase," she told herself. "Ethan will snap out of it. The plant is working exactly as it should." However, the days dragged on, and the world began to change. Word of Elysia's effects spread quickly within the scientific community. People came to witness its effects, each person eager to experience the promise of peace and happiness the plant offered. But the peace was fleeting, and as time went on, the plant's influence grew stronger, more insidious. Tina invited Dr. Carter, a renowned expert in plant genetics, to her lab for a deeper analysis of Elysia. Tina was hopeful that Dr. Carter would validate her work. But when the doctor arrived and took one look at the plant, her face twisted into something between awe and concern. "This is dangerous," Dr. Carter whispered, her voice trembling. "You don't understand the full scope of what you've created, Tina." Tina's heart sank. "What do you mean?" Dr. Carter avoided eye contact. "You need to stop. Immediately. The plant is altering more than just emotions. It's manipulating their minds. Their very thoughts. It's like it's rewriting their mental state." Tina frowned. "You're overreacting. It's making them happy." But Dr. Carter's eyes were wide with fear. "It's not happiness, Tina. It's submission. The plant is taking control. You don't know how deep it goes. I've seen it before in different forms, but nothing like this." Later that evening, Tina returned home to find Ethan sitting at the kitchen table, his eyes glued to a book, but not really reading it. His movements were slow and deliberate, as if he was acting on autopilot. The warmth of the house felt stifling, and the usual noise of the outside world seemed muffled. "Ethan!" Tina called softly, but he didn't respond. His face was completely blank, his gaze empty. It was as if he didn't see her. Panicking, Tina rushed over to him, gently shaking his shoulders. "Ethan, look at me!" His head snapped up, but his eyes didn't focus on her. He smiled slowly, almost unnervingly, as though he recognized her but didn't care. "I'm happy, Mom," he said in a flat, robotic voice. "Everything is fine now. I'm at peace." The hairs on the back of Tina's neck stood up. This was not her son. Ethan had always been energetic, quick-witted, full of life. But now, he was a hollow shell, speaking in empty phrases with no emotion behind them. Tina's breath caught in her throat. She was no longer sure if she was dealing with a scientific breakthrough or a nightmare. Word about Elysia began to spread beyond the scientific community. Soon, the government took notice. Special investigators arrived, drawn by reports of strange behavior and unexplained changes in people who had come into contact with the plant. They arrived at Tina's lab under the guise of conducting a routine safety check, but Tina could see the fear in their eyes as they took in the plant. The lead investigator, Agent Harper, approached Tina cautiously. "We've received multiple Reports of people experiencing sudden emotional detachment, even violence, after exposure. What exactly are you doing here, Dr. Walker? Tina tried to maintain her calm, but a surge of panic boiled in her chest. I've been working to help people, to improve their mental health. The plant releases a pollen that induces happiness and peace. Harper was skeptical, but there was something in his gaze that told Tina he wasn't buying it. We've heard about the side effects. People losing their sense of self, detaching from their surroundings. These aren't just mood swings, Dr. Walker. People are disappearing into themselves. Tina clenched her fists. It's not like that. The plant's effects are temporary, and it's not dangerous. But deep inside, she knew she was lying. She knew the plant was doing something far worse than just altering emotions. The Elysia was feeding off its subjects, manipulating them, turning them into mindless drones. As the investigators delved deeper into the plant's effects, they began to notice unsettling behavioral changes in those exposed to Elysia. What started as a calm, peaceful detachment soon escalated into aggression and paranoia. People who had been around the plant began to act erratically, violently attacking others in fits of unexplainable rage. Tina was horrified as she witnessed the plant's true power unfold before her eyes. The plant wasn't just making people happy, it was feeding on their emotions, manipulating them into states of emotional exhaustion and detachment until they broke down and lashed out. One night, while examining the lab, Tina overheard Luke talking to one of the investigators. His voice trembled with fear. "We have to destroy it," Luke insisted, "before it's too late. If we let this continue, we'll lose control." But Tina didn't listen. The thought of abandoning Elysia felt impossible. She had invested everything in it. Her reputation, her work, her very belief that this was the key to a better world. She couldn't let go, but deep down, she knew. Elysia had already won, and soon it would be too late to stop it. As Tina stood in front of Elysia, her mind racing, she saw her reflection in the glass. Pale. Haunted. The once thriving plant that she had created now seemed almost monstrous, with its twisting roots and spreading tendrils. She could hear a faint humming sound coming from the plant, like a low melodic whisper. Suddenly it hit her. Elysia wasn't just changing the people around her, it was changing her too. Slowly but surely she was slipping into its influence, becoming just like the others. The warmth, the peace, it all came at a price. Her heart pounded. She felt the weight of her choices bearing down on her. She had opened Pandora's box, and now there was no turning back. Tina couldn't escape the creeping dread gnawing at her. Despite the warnings, she clung to the belief that Elysia could still be controlled, that it could help humanity. But each day, the plant seemed to take more from her. Ethan's once vibrant personality was now replaced with an eerie calmness. It was as if the spark of life in him had been extinguished. Luke, too, was affected. His energy was gone, his once cynical humor replaced with a passive indifference. It was like they were all losing pieces of themselves, but none of them were willing to acknowledge it. Then, Tina noticed something else. The plant had grown exponentially. Its vines twisted around. The lab, reaching into places they hadn't been before, like it was actively searching for something, and the air around it felt charged, thick with a presence she couldn't explain. At night, Tina could hear whispering, faint voices. The plant seemed to be calling to her, pulling her deeper into its embrace. And when she looked in the mirror, her reflection felt foreign, as if her own face was slowly becoming unrecognizable. Agent Harper and the other investigators had stayed on, their suspicion growing. There was a palpable unease in the air whenever they came into the lab. Tina could see the exhaustion in their eyes, the fear that they were dealing with something beyond their control. It wasn't just the plant anymore, it was the people around them. One night, as the investigators began to unravel the mystery of Elysia, they discovered a disturbing pattern. The plant's influence wasn't just psychological, it was physical. Those who had been exposed to the pollen began showing signs of physical decay. Their bodies seemed to age unnaturally, with their skin becoming translucent, veins visible beneath the surface. Tina watched in horror as one of the investigators, a man named Sam, began to convulse violently. His eyes rolled back in his head, and his breath came in short, ragged gasps. When he finally stopped, his body was rigid, his face a mask of pure terror. He whispered one word over and over before his final breath. "Elysia." Tina recoiled in fear. She hadn't realized it until now, but the plant was more than just an experiment. It was a living entity, and it was consuming everyone around her. Luke's gradual transformation was becoming impossible to ignore. He no longer spoke, no longer reacted to anything. His eyes remained glazed, his once quick-witted tongue replaced by silence. The light in his eyes had dimmed completely, and Tina feared he was gone forever. One evening, she caught him standing in front of the plant, staring at it with an unblinking gaze. His lips parted as though he were trying to speak, but no sound came out. Tina approached cautiously, her heart pounding. "Luke?" she whispered. "Are you okay?" His response was chilling. "I don't need to be okay. I'm part of it now. I'm free." Tina's blood ran cold. He wasn't Luke anymore. The Elysia had taken him, just like it had taken the others. He was another puppet, his mind no longer his own. The plant had become more than just a scientific curiosity. It had become a god, worshipped by those it controlled. And the more Tina tried to resist, the more she realized that the plant's influence was far-reaching and insidious. She tried everything, stopping its water supply, cutting its roots, even trying to burn it. But nothing worked. The plant's roots had burrowed deep into the building's foundation, and it wasn't going anywhere. Each day, the plant grew stronger, its influence seeping into everything it touched. The air became thick with its sweet scent, and those exposed to it began to speak in riddles. Tina could no longer tell where the plant ended and the people began. The investigators, too, had begun to break down. One by one, they became lost in the haze of Elysia, no longer questioning it, no longer fighting. Dr. Carter, who had once been so adamant about the plant's dangers, was now part of the collective, her mind consumed by the plant's whispers. Tina knew that time was running out. If she didn't find a way to stop the plant, there would be no hope for anyone. Desperation drove her to take a final, drastic step. She began researching Elysia's origins, hoping to find some clue, some weakness, that could destroy it. What she discovered was far worse than she could have imagined. Elysia wasn't just a plant, it was a parasite, a creature that fed off its host's emotions, manipulating them until they were nothing but husks. And what's worse, Elysia was not of this world. It had come from somewhere beyond their understanding, and it had chosen Earth as its new host. The plant had been in her life longer than she knew, its roots tangled in her past. It had followed her, watching her every step, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Tina was just the beginning. The plant was preparing to spread, and soon the world would be its next victim. Tina, now fully aware of the horrifying truth, made one last attempt to stop the plant. With her mind nearly consumed by the terror it had unleashed, she approached the plant, her heart pounding in her chest. The vines seemed to pulse, responding to her presence as if it were alive. Tina could feel it pulling at her, reaching inside her, trying to take control. It was no longer just a matter of science. It was a battle for her soul. With trembling hands, she took the final step. "I'm not yours," she whispered, pressing her palm to the glass. "I will stop you." But the plant had other plans. It responded to her resistance with a violent surge, the roots breaking free of their confines. The lab shook, the air growing thick with the plant's poisonous influence. Tina screamed, but it was too late. Elysia was too powerful. Tina had reached the breaking point. The plant's grip on her mind, her very soul, was undeniable. She could feel its presence always lurking, its tendrils reaching into her thoughts, pulling her deeper into madness. It was no longer just the people around her who were affected. The very world seemed to warp in its wake. The once normal lab had turned into a grotesque reflection of itself. The walls were covered in a thick, dark mold that pulsated like the veins of a living creature. The air smelled sickly sweet, and the very ground beneath her feet seemed to shift, as if the building itself were alive. The whispers in her mind were growing louder. The plant had connected to her in a way she couldn't fully understand. It wasn't just influencing her behavior. It was controlling her thoughts, her very essence. It was taking away everything that made her human. Tina knew she had to escape, but where could she go? The outside world felt just as unnatural. Through the cracked windows, she could see the sky, its once blue color now a sickly green, the clouds swirling unnaturally. The plant's reach had extended far beyond the lab. It was already taking over the world, and there was no stopping it. The others were already lost. Ethan had long since stopped being the man she knew. He wandered the halls with a vacant expression, his movements jerky and uncoordinated, like a puppet controlled by invisible strings. Luke had become completely unrecognizable. His once mischievous smile had turned into a blank, emotionless stare. He no longer even spoke. Agent Harper, too, had fallen victim to the plant's hold. The last shred of resistance she had shown crumbled away as she wandered through the lab, speaking in riddles, her words no longer her own. "We're all Elysia now," she muttered, repeating the plant's name over and over like a mantra. Tina could see the horror in the eyes of the remaining investigators. But it was too late for them. One by one they were drawn into the plant's influence, their bodies bending to its will. In the midst of the madness, Dr. Carter came to her. His once rational mind had been swallowed whole by Elysia's power. He now moved like a puppet. His eyes glazed over, void of any empathy or humanity. "You can't fight it, Tina," Dr. Carter's voice echoed, sounding more like a distant echo than the man she had once trusted. "You were chosen. We all were. Elysia. It's everywhere now. It's all we are." Tina screamed, but her voice was drowned out by the growling of the vines and the shrieking of those around her. The plant had turned them into instruments of terror. Tina, now the last sane person in the lab, realized the horrifying truth. There was no escape. The plant was too powerful, too pervasive. It had already infected the world beyond the lab, and its influence was spreading faster than they could comprehend. But still, she couldn't give up. She couldn't let Elysia win. She refused to become just another pawn in its game. Desperation fueled her. Tina began to gather what little strength she had left. There was one last hope, a device in the lab, a failsafe that had been developed in case the plant got out of control. It was a last-ditch effort to try and sever the connection between the plant and those it had infected. The device was a high-frequency disruptor that could potentially block the plant's influence. But it was a long shot, and Tina knew it would likely come with a terrible cost. Tina made her way to the central control room, the walls around her pulsating as if alive. The whispers, louder than ever before. She could feel Elysia in her head, clawing at her mind, trying to break her. As she reached the control room, Tina found Agent Harper standing there, her eyes blank and hollow. She was speaking in tongues, her body shaking uncontrollably. "You don't have to do this," Tina pleaded, her voice breaking. "We can still stop it. We can still fight back." But Harper's response was only a hollow, emotionless laugh. "We're already lost. We are all part of it now." Tina didn't have time to argue. She activated the device, her hands trembling. The machine hummed to life, sending a pulse of energy through the lab, causing the walls to tremble. The vines recoiled, and for a moment, Tina thought it might work. But then, the plant responded. The room was plunged into darkness, the hum of the machine replaced by an unnatural silence. Tina could feel Alicia closing in on her, suffocating her with its malevolent presence. The room shook violently as the vines ripped through the walls, bursting in every direction. Tina was thrown to the floor, her head spinning from the force of the impact. She scrambled to her feet, her mind a blur of fear and adrenaline. The plant, now fully awakened, towered before her. Its massive vines seemed to move of their own accord, reaching out toward her, suffocating the air around her. It was everywhere now, its roots extending deep into the earth, its influence stretching across the world. And then, the horrifying truth hit her. The plant didn't need to just control the humans, it needed to consume them. It was feeding on their fear, their emotions, and it was now preparing to absorb everything. Tina realized that the plant had already succeeded in its ultimate goal. It had become the dominant force, transcending human understanding. But Tina wasn't done fighting. With one final burst of willpower, she rushed toward the central control panel. She had only one option left. If she couldn't stop Alicia, she could at least contain it. Tina pressed the emergency button. The lab exploded in light, and for a moment there was silence. Tina had done all she could to stop Alicia. The machine was meant to sever its influence, but instead, it had unleashed something far worse. As the final pulse of energy rippled out, it had not only caused the plant to recoil, but triggered a worldwide catastrophe. The skies turned black, swirling with violent storms, while earthquakes shattered the Earth's surface. Cities collapsed under the weight of the plant's growth. Entire forests turned into lifeless wastelands. The plant's influence was no longer confined to the lab. It was consuming everything. Tina barely registered the destruction outside. The control room had crumbled, leaving her amidst the wreckage of the once sterile laboratory. The smell of decay was thick in the air, and the walls seemed to pulse with life, as if the very building had become an extension of Elysia. The last remnants of humanity were scattered and disorganized. Groups of survivors were trapped in isolated locations, unaware of each other's existence. The remaining survivors, including Luke and Ethan, had been captured by the plant's influence. Their bodies were twisted and corrupted beyond recognition. The lines between human and Elysia blurred beyond comprehension. The plant's power over their minds had completely overtaken them, reducing them to mere vessels for its will. Tina, despite her exhaustion, knew that the world was now irrevocably changed. The plant had already started to form massive structures, its roots wrapping around the planet, plunging it into eternal darkness. The last remnants of human civilization were scattered, trying to hold on, but they had no idea what they were facing. The world had become a living nightmare. Tina's last hope lay in a small group of survivors she had found, hiding in the remnants of a secluded town. They were broken, weary, and terrified, but they were alive. They had managed to stay hidden from Elysia's influence, though they were aware that it was only a matter of time before they, too, would be consumed. But Tina had learned something crucial during her time in the lab. There was a way to fight back. The survivors had found shelter in the ruins of a former military base, the last bastion of human resistance. They had heard rumors of an ancient artifact, hidden deep in a mountain range, that had the power to destroy Elysia at its core. The artifact had been passed down through generations, and legends spoke of its power to sever the connection between the plant and the earth itself. The artifact was their last hope, and Tina knew she had to find it before Elysia could reach them. Together with the survivors, Tina set out for the mountains, facing obstacles that seemed insurmountable. The landscape was unrecognizable, ravaged by Elysia's relentless growth. The plant had begun to form monstrous, twisted creatures, humans and animals alike, mutated beyond recognition, wandering the wastelands in search of new prey. The group fought tooth and nail, each battle pushing them further to the edge. They encountered horrific sights. Entire towns turned to ash. Forests turned into grotesque versions of themselves. But the survivors kept moving forward, driven by a single thought. If they could find the artifact, they could end this nightmare. The journey to the mountains was long and treacherous. The survivors faced constant attacks from the mutated creatures, their bodies twisted and torn by Elysia's influence. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the once beautiful landscape was now a battlefield of broken dreams. As they reached the entrance to the mountain range, they stumbled upon an old temple, hidden away from the world for centuries. Inside, the air was cold and oppressive, and the walls were lined with ancient carvings. The survivors were exhausted, but they pressed on, knowing they were so close. The artifact was said to be hidden within the deepest chamber, protected by ancient traps and defenses. Tina led the group through the labyrinthine tunnels, fighting off creatures that were drawn to the artifact's power. The deeper they went, the stronger the pull of Elysia became, like a weight in the air, pressing down on their minds. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the heart of the temple. There, in the center of a vast chamber, was the artifact, a small, glowing crystal surrounded by ancient symbols. It hummed with power, its light flickering like a dying star. Tina stepped forward, her heart racing. She knew that if she took the artifact, there was no turning back. The plant would know of their presence, and it would stop at nothing to destroy them. But they had no other choice. As Tina took the artifact, the temple began to shake violently. The air grew thick with energy, and the ground beneath them cracked open. Elysia had sensed the disturbance, and it was coming for them. The survivors rushed to the exit, but the tunnel collapsed around them. The temple was crumbling, and the path out was blocked by falling debris. Tina felt the presence of Elysia closing in on them, its power overwhelming. They had no time to escape. They were trapped. But then, something unexpected happened. The artifact began to glow brighter, its energy pulsating in sync with Elysia's own vibrations. Tina realized that the artifact was not just a weapon, it was a link to the plant itself. It had the power to sever the connection between Elysia and the earth, but doing so would cost everything. With a final, desperate scream, Tina activated the artifact. The energy surged, crackling through the temple, and for a brief moment, Tina felt the presence of Elysia fighting back, its tendrils reaching for her soul. But the artifact's power was greater. The world around them exploded in a burst of light, and everything went silent. The world, once shrouded in darkness and death, began to heal. But the victory over Elysia came at an unimaginable cost. The survivors, Luke, Ethan, Dr. Carter, and the handful of others who managed to escape the destruction of the temple, were left to pick up the pieces of what was once a thriving planet. Tina's sacrifice had severed the connection between Elysia and the Earth, halting its growth and monstrous influence. But the damage done was irreversible. Cities lay in ruins, vast forests had turned to ash, and the Earth was scarred by the plant's twisted roots. Humanity had lost its greatest battle, but it had won the war. The survivors, haunted by the faces of those they had lost, and the horrors they had witnessed, struggled to comprehend what had happened. They were alive, but at what cost? The future felt uncertain, and no one could shake the fear that the peace they had fought for might only be temporary. Luke, once a scientist in the field of botany, found himself struggling with a new kind of guilt. The research he had once worked on had contributed to Alicia's creation. Now, he was burdened with the knowledge that the very thing he had once believed could save humanity had nearly destroyed it. He felt like a prisoner to his own mind, constantly haunted by his past mistakes. Ethan, a former soldier, became the de facto leader of the survivors. His resolve was ironclad, but even he couldn't escape the nightmares that plagued him. His body had been ravaged by Alicia's influence, and the mutations that had altered his very DNA still lingered, threatening to turn him into something unrecognizable. Yet, despite the fear, he found a new purpose in helping rebuild what was left of humanity. Dr. Carter, who had once been a part of the team responsible for Alicia's creation, was now dedicated to ensuring that no one would ever repeat the mistakes of the past. However, she was racked with guilt for her role in unleashing the nightmare. She spent countless hours in the remains of the lab, desperately trying to find answers. Answers that might help the world rebuild, or, at the very least, prevent another disaster from arising. Despite Alicia's defeat, an unease continued to gnaw at the survivors. The plant's influence, though severed from the earth, still seemed to have a presence, an eerie silence, like a distant scream just beyond the veil of reality. The survivors knew that the earth was slowly recovering, but there was no denying that something had changed within the fabric of the planet itself. The world had become a new, unpredictable place. The survivors began to notice strange occurrences. Plants that shouldn't have been able to grow thriving in unusual places. Unseen creatures that appeared to be a mix of human and plant-like features began to roam the wilderness. The plant's legacy had not been fully erased, and the mutations it caused were still manifesting in ways no one could fully understand. One night, while exploring the ruins of a once thriving city, Luke and Dr. Carter stumbled upon something that sent a chill down their spines. Seeds scattered across the ground, pulsing with a faint, eerie glow. They were unmistakable, Alicia's seeds, and they were alive. These new seeds seemed to carry an unknown energy, something that had survived the destruction. Luke recognized them immediately, and panic gripped his chest. "This isn't over," he muttered, his mind racing. Ethan, who had been on the lookout, sensed something was wrong. He returned to the group to warn them, but as they prepared to flee, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The seeds began to sprout, slowly at first, but then rapidly, growing into towering, grotesque forms, twisting the very environment around them. The survivors found themselves once again fighting for their lives, but this time, they knew that the enemy was not simply a plant, it was something worse. The new growths were not just physical manifestations of Alicia. They were a new breed of horror. The influence of the plant had been mutating the environment, the people, and even the land itself. The survivors had no choice but to band together and face this new nightmare head-on. They decided to return to the heart of the plant's origin, the remains of the original lab. It was the only place that might hold answers to what had gone wrong, and how they could stop the spreading nightmare. The journey was treacherous, filled with more mutated creatures and increasingly violent environmental shifts. The Earth itself seemed to fight back, as if reacting to the presence of the survivors. The air was thick with a new kind of terror, the fear that the Earth was now fully under the control of Alicia's twisted legacy. When they finally reached the lab, they discovered something terrifying. An underground chamber that had been hidden away during the initial experiments. Inside was a massive tree-like structure. Its roots spread across the lab's foundations, feeding into a massive, pulsating core. The core was alive, and it was connected to the Earth in ways they had never imagined. Dr. Carter realized that the only way to stop the nightmare once and for all was to destroy the core. But doing so would require an unimaginable sacrifice. The core was the heart of Elysia, and it had become intertwined with the Earth's very essence. Destroying it might save humanity, but it could also mean the end of life as they knew it. In the end, it came down to one choice: destroy the core and risk annihilating the Earth's remaining ecosystems, or allow the plant to continue spreading and consume everything in its path. Tina's sacrifice had severed Elysia's connection to the planet, but the plant's true form, its consciousness, had not been eradicated. The survivors had no time to debate. They had seen enough of what the plant could do, and they knew that the world was on the brink of extinction. Luke, Ethan, Dr. Carter, and the remaining survivors worked together, using everything they had learned to destroy the core and stop the growth of Elysia. In the final moments, as the core began to disintegrate, the Earth shook violently, as if protesting. The survivors braced themselves, knowing this was their last stand. The core exploded, sending waves of energy throughout the surrounding land, but the process was irreversible. The plant's final grasp on the Earth was severed. The world fell silent once again.